pleasure to turn the microphone to Shardul Shroff, who is the founder and managing partner of one of India's preeminent law firms, and who's going to talk to us and levitate. He's promised to levitate the crowd. So, Shardul, take it away.
Orlando and dear friends, it is indeed a pleasure for me to come and speak to you on a topic which really touches my heart: why India is one of the expected dominant forces of the new world economy in the coming decades. There is a lot going on in India. China has had the last 2 decades, and I think time has come for India to now step in and be at least at par with China. A little bit about the firm. We've just reorganized the firm. We were originally the Amarchand Mangaldas Shroff and Company firm, but we have divided it now into 2 firms, one in the name of Shardul Amarchand Mangaldas and the other in the name of Shroff Amarchand Mangaldas. It has a legacy of about 100 years almost. We're in the 98th year, and we are present in 6 cities across India, which are the key business cities. That is Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, Kolkata, Ahmedabad, and Gurgaon. And our work is such that we have an excellent spread between international work, domestic work, and work with government on changes in policy on the side of drafting legislation. So it's been a very, very interesting sort of combination of work which very few law firms really get to do. And we've been working with the government for 25 years across 7 governments. So, and that's possible because we've kept ourselves apolitical. The firm today has a reputation of being a trusted advisor to several large corporates. It is known to be an excellent place to work and place to be in terms of the training and mentoring that is delivered. We have been consistently getting the Asian Meena Award for the most responsive firm in that region. We are known to be innovators in the law, creating solutions which evade other law firms, and we work very extensively in a collaborative way with the client and understand the client first before we switch on to matters. We are very well known in the pro bono segment. We do a lot of pro bono work, and we have our own program called PUNK, which is basically looking at child education, poverty, health issues of poor people, dowry and child marriage issues. We have a very unique diversity at the firm. 50% of the firm across every level comprises of women. We have managed that over the last 17 years. The firm has diverse practice areas, but its strengths are in corporate, in mergers and acquisitions, private equity, projects and project finance. So it would not be an exaggeration to state that the very first telecom project, the very first power project, the very first water port, the very first airport, the very first road project, the very first water project have all been created by the firm as part of the concessions made on behalf of the government. And these are now the precedents which India follows. We have a very dominant practice in capital markets. We have a fairly large practice on taxation, an extremely large practice on dispute resolution and competition law, and we dabble in some minor areas also. Having said that about the firm, let me get straight into speaking about the topic for which I have been requested to come. This is a broad outline of what I'm going to speak on. India and its economy, the new government regime, foreign investment trends, key priorities, challenges for the government, the economy before and after this new government, key initiatives of the new government, key tax reforms, key achievements, investment and trade policies in India, foreign direct investment, international recognition, and some bilateral agreements. It's a long agenda, and this presentation is available, I think, from FLI. They will give it to you. So I'm going to rush at some points because if I spend too much time on each slide, it will take 2 hours. A little bit about the Republic itself. We are a republic which has been created out of the dominion status when we were dominion of the British government. We gave ourselves the constitution on 26th of January 1950, and that is the source of all law in India. Even the pre-independence laws have been legitimized by constitutional recognition in India. India is a federal structure, and therefore there are states which have legislative powers, and the federal government or the central government also has legislative powers. We have 3 lists: what is exclusively in the domain of the central government, what is exclusively in the domain of the states, and there are 29 states and 7 union territories, and what is a mixed list in which both the center and the state can legislate. But if in the later legislation which receives the president's assent is the law of that particular state. There are 3 arms of the government: the executive branch, which is really the elected government; the legislative branch, which is an assembly where law is made and legislation is drafted; and we have a fairly well-crafted judicial system which is headed by the Supreme Court of India as the apex law court, followed by high courts and subordinate courts in each state. Why is India today seen with some sense of rosiness? Because all around there is still an optimism, and the Indian economy, the World Bank still sees us at almost 6.7% GDP this year, which is almost twice or thrice of what the predictions are in, say, Europe. Our GDP composition is about 65% services, 18% industry, and 17% agriculture. Our economy was essentially an agrarian economy, but we have moved to become the dominant services industry, economy. This year, just as recent as April 24, we have an estimated reserves of $344 billion, which is quite significant compared to a situation where in 1971 we had to pledge our gold to have a stable rupee. So we have moved significantly in the last 30 years. India actually opened itself out in 1991, and from that perspective it is a fairly young economy, just 24 years old. But it's an ancient economy with over a 3,000 years heritage, and that is seen in the living styles of Indians. We have a fairly wide range of exporting countries, and the foreign equity flows this year, which is again quite a significant sum, is about $41 billion between April 2014 and February 2015. The top investing countries have been Mauritius, Singapore, UK, Japan, Netherlands, USA, Cyprus, Germany, France, and Switzerland. Some of these countries are countries which have fabulous double tax avoidance treaties and bilateral investment protection treaties, and therefore Mauritius, Netherlands, Cyprus, Singapore are having an advantage in India in that there is no charge of capital gains if a foreign investor from these locations makes a sale of its shares. There are many sectors which are now drawing high levels of FDI, and these sectors are the service sectors, say like IT and IT-enabled services, construction development, because India is now open to 100% ownership in the space of construction development, which includes township development. Telecommunications, we've just finished a round of auctions of the spectrum for the next 20 years of the dominant Indian mobile companies, dominant telecom companies in India. In the space of computer software and hardware, India is a fairly significant location, and it has now also transited its manufacturing facilities abroad, and several places like Ireland are seeing Indian movement both in the space of aviation, drugs and computer manufacture. So there is that collaboration happening. Drugs and pharmaceuticals is a fairly important activity because the generic industries, the generic drugs are significantly manufactured in India, and therefore there is a great track to looking at mergers and acquisitions, because when you tie up the proprietary or innovative drugs with the back end of generic drugs, it is an unbeatable combination. We have a fairly large developed automobile industry, and now that is spread over 2 zones, one near Delhi, the second being near Gujarat, and the third being near Chennai, where almost every manufacturer of cars, global manufacturer of cars, is today present. What are the advantages of India in investing in India? We are the world's largest democracy of 1.2 billion people. That's a very significant number, because it also, I think it sort of is contrary to the Malthusian theory that if you have too many people, the world will really go down under. We are seeing exactly the opposite, where the people that we have become our strongest resource in terms of how India grows. It is a very stable environment. The government changed, but it was a very smooth transition. Bitter rivalry between the Congress and the Bharatiya Janata Party, but when it came to transition, it was extremely smooth. We have a responsive administrative setup, and it's been very significantly geared up now because of the way in which Modi himself functions. There is an established judiciary which has more than 125 years of precedent, which steps in to enforce the rule of law. I think what distinguishes India is its judiciary and, of course, its free press, because these two are pillars of democracy, and we have a very active judiciary which responds very quickly to public wrongs. We have an abundance of natural resources, whether it's steel, whether it's alumina, whether it's coal, and most of the natural resources that you need to manufacture are available in India. India's growth, these are all projections, is expected to outpace China in 5 years. India is likely to become the fastest large economy with 9 to 10% growth over the next 20 to 25 years. This is a Morgan Stanley report. The change in the regulatory system and policy systems is making India investor friendly. The Indian economy will grow 5-fold in the next 20 years. The cost competitiveness still today is quite low, and the total labor force is nearly 530 million people. There's a large pool of skilled manpower, strong knowledge base with significant English-speaking population. Double entry system of accounting is also one of the strengths of India. We are a very young country when it comes to the age group. Currently, our average age is 30 years, but come time, another 10 years, we will be even younger, with the population average being about 27, between 25 and 27 in India. And that is the demographic dividend which India will explore when it becomes the exporter of trained people across the world. There is a huge untapped market potential. So this was demonstrated in India when there was a worldwide recession. Companies like Unilever just switched from their export programs to merely supplying domestically. And they rode the entire recession because the market in India is pretty deep when it comes to products which are correctly priced. The urban population of India would double from the 2001 census figure of 290 million to approximately 590 million by 2030, which is a phenomenal rise in urban people. There is a progressive simplification and rationalization of the tax regime, which is constantly under review. There is a reduction in import tariffs, partly because we are a WTO member, and these are WTO commitments. The Reserve Bank of India governor, that is the Central Bank of India, has already made a statement this year that within 2 years, the company and the rupee will have full convertibility on the current account. We are not a fully convertible currency, and therefore this will be a very significant step because it will enable purchase of foreign currency from rupee reserves to really repatriate outside. The banking system is fairly robust and strong in that we have never failed as a country on our global commitments. Banking has been also opened out, and the new type of banks, which are semi-virtual and partly brick and mortar, are expected to launch their businesses by the 1st of October. The IDFC Bank and there is another bank which has emerged out of low-cost banking, which has been given these 2 licenses. The IMF in its World Economic Outlook expects India to grow at 6.3% in 2015 and 6.5% in 2016, after which it is likely to cross China's projected growth rate. The ICICI Bank, which is one of the premium private banks of India, expects that India's macroeconomic prospects will strengthen and best position after emerging market economies gain global investors' attention. Even today, the index is at an all-time high, the stock market index is at an all-time high. When you consider the peak in 2008 and currently, it is 10,000 points higher than what it was in 2008, which was considered the boom period of the stock exchange. The Capital Economics, which is again a publisher, an independent macroeconomic research company, sees the Indian economy expanding by 5.5% in 2015, owing to the fall of crude oil prices and interest rates. We have a very stable interest rate regime, and inflation has been remarkably controlled because of the crude price being low. One of the problems which any democracy faces is how does it manage inflation, and correspondingly how does it manage interest rates. But because the dollar, we are a highly importing nation when it comes to oil, and because oil is at current prices quite low, the economy has benefited from the low prices. A little bit about the new government, because I think it was a game changer in some sense for India, which was otherwise stuck in policy paralysis. There were a lot of scams, and the courts had really taken it upon themselves to investigate and really unravel those wrongdoings. In May 2014, and they've just finished 1 year, day before yesterday, the Bharatiya Janata Party won the general elections. This is for the national executive, with 280 seats, 82 seats out of a total of 543 seats in the Lok Sabha, and they have a support of another 55. So they have an overwhelming support and strength in the lower house, which is called the Lok Sabha. It is for the first time in 30 years that a government has been formed without a coalition. What had happened in the past was, because of coalition politics, the manner in which India could change its laws became very stilted, as there were several pulls and forces which really delayed legislation. And that is now, we're seeing the end of that. The regime that they want to develop is minimum government, maximum governance. So there's a great emphasis on governance and clean governance. The election of this party has created a huge confidence among industry. Stock markets, as I mentioned, have gained lifetime highs. There's a jump start in M&A activity, and deals of over 17 billion have happened in the first half of 2014. The emphasis on it being the world's largest democracy has also changed global political alignments. I don't think we've had such an active Prime Minister for the last 3 decades, in that almost every month he is visiting countries of the world and actually drawing upon the collaboration and really entering into pacts with several governments. And that has proved fairly successful, and it turned out to be fairly important when one looks at the amount of new political agreements that have been struck for India. India is also seen in some sense as a hedge to China, Afghanistan and Pakistan. We were the first, I think this Prime Minister was the first to invite all the heads of the SAARC nations to his swearing-in ceremony. So this is how the legislature currently pans out. These are some of the key ministers of our government. The Prime Minister is Mr. Modi. Mr. Rajnath Singh is the Minister of Home Affairs. Mrs. Sushma Swaraj is the External Affairs Minister. Mr. Jaitley is a very powerful minister in the government, is looking at finance. He had at one point held the post of finance and defense, which is for the first time in the Indian economy that any minister was actually straddling both what we call the North Bloc and the South Bloc. North Bloc is traditionally the finance and South Bloc is traditionally defense. So he was the only, I have known, the only minister who has actually been chairing both sides of the Rajpath place. He now holds Ministry of Information Broadcasting, and we have a new defense minister, Manohar Parrikar, and I'll tell you what is happening on the defense field. An enormous amount of activity and an enormous amount of investments have just been cleared, and the defense sector is booming absolutely. For the surface transport and highways, we have the minister, Mr. Nitin Gadkari. He has also a very important post when you consider the amount of funds that are going into road development and highway development and linking India, because that is one of the game changers which is being seen currently in the Indian context. Mrs. Nirmala Sitharaman is the Minister of Commerce and Industry. The Minister of Law and Justice is Mr. Gowda, and Mr. Piyush Goyal is also a very important minister in that he holds the posts of both power and coal and new renewable energy. So the energy segment, as we look at it in terms of the domestic portfolios, is a fairly critical minister in the Indian sense, Indian text. These are the trends in foreign direct investments and the ratio of how it has come from different countries, with Mauritius having the largest pool because of its double tax avoidance treaty, and other countries which are Japan, Singapore, Cyprus, Germany, USA has a very significant investment, and UK has also got its fair share. What are the sectors which are being invested into? Services has the highest proportion, followed by tourism, metallurgy, construction also is fairly significant, drugs and pharmaceuticals, power, chemicals, computer, software and hardware, and telecommunications. This is before the spectrum auction, and the auction has fetched almost $12 billion for the next 20 years of telephony. This is the proportion in which we are receiving foreign direct investments, 19% in services, 11% in construction, and construction includes real estate, funds, investments into township, investment into construction companies. So it's a fairly large group. Telecommunications, computer software. The number of telephones, mobile telephones which get added every month or every 2 months is the size of the telephones which are there in UK. We add about 17 million handsets or chips every month. And the growth in this sector is just phenomenal. Computer software and hardware is also an important segment, as I explained. Drugs and pharmaceuticals. There's a lot of foreign movement into India to really look at the generic space. And also some of the new innovative plays are also happening in India. It has become a drug discovery location. Chemicals, automobiles, power, metallurgy, and hotels and tourism. This is the way the sector-specific investments have been made. What I just read out, how it's broken up. Agriculture, rural development, then you have scientific. This is how the government spends its rupee. That was the 11th five-year plan, and this is the 12th five-year plan, which really is from 2012 to 2017. It's almost $1 trillion expectation of investments into India. M&A activity has also become significant and grown substantially between the last year and this year. It's about 38 billion by the first quarter, effective. The combined index of core industries stood at about 166.2, which is about 6.7% higher than what it was. And the industries which go into the components are coal, electricity, crude oil, and cement. India has signed up treaties with Germany for working groups on the economy and water management. And there are several of such agreements which have been put into place by the Prime Minister. The most significant appointment has been in the context of railways, where the Indian government has announced that you are able to put almost $14.5 million in the Indian railway infrastructure through the FDI route, and this is on an annual basis. The ability to invest is massive. The big project, or the most sort of visible project, is going to be the high-speed corridor project between Bombay and Ahmedabad. Bombay as in Maharashtra, and Ahmedabad, which is the capital of Gujarat, where the Prime Minister really originates from. The other big projects which are ongoing are the large projects of CSTM Panvel, which is again connected via Mumbai, about 2.25 billion in the public-private space, and the Kachrapura railway coach factory. Huge investments are expected to take place in railway coach manufacturing, and almost all the global players who manufacture this globally are participating in the auction. There is a continuous inflow of FDI, demonstrating faith that overseas investors have in the economy. The government's policy regime and looking at the business environment is to see that foreign exchange and foreign capital keeps flowing into India. We have relaxed significantly the foreign direct investment norms in defense, public sector oil refineries, telecom, power exchanges, and stock exchanges, among others. Direct investment into these have now been facilitated. Big global brands such as Tesco, Singapore Airlines, and Etihad have lined up to invest. We have 3 new airlines in which 2 investments have been made by Tatas, in Air Asia and in Vistara. And there's a 3rd airline which is also competing. We have a very different structure towards multi-brand retailing, because there is still hesitation to open multi-brand retailing in India. Single brand retailing is permissible in India. What India has therefore done is to permit foreign direct investment in a marketplace, which could be an e-marketplace, where the marketplace or the market maker can list everyone's products and cause the sale on a global basis or in India. And that is not considered as multi-brand retailing. So this has opened the world to the Amazons, and there is a very significant, trillions of dollars are now really being invested in Snapdeal, in Flipkart, and of course in Amazon, where they're opening up the market for a huge retail space. I have already mentioned that the services sector and the Mauritius as the 2 biggest investing zones. What are the reasons why India is becoming a magnet of investments? There is a very large and growing middle class, and the graduation of poor to middle class, and therefore growing domestic consumption. Government is constantly reviewing investor-friendly policies. The cost of production is still lower due to lower labor costs. The availability of skilled manpower is high, it could be higher, and there are several missions now put in place for skilled manpower development. Abundant natural resources, English as one of the major business languages, the government's emphasis on infrastructure development and improvement, and the location of being close to the South Asian markets, Middle East and Europe. As per the projections of renowned consultants and IMF, India is likely to become one of the largest economies, certainly in the top 3 by the year 2025. The Indian cabinet has recently cleared 100% foreign direct investment in railway infrastructure, including operations. Though the move does not permit foreign firms to operate trains, it allows to do everything else, including create the network and supply trains including bullet trains. Based on the recommendations of the Foreign Investment Promotion Board, this February, projects of almost 2,857 billion rupees have been, 28 billion rupees have been allowed recently. The big move that Indian government made was to change the limited investment position in insurance. We had a cap, a legislative cap of 26%, which has now been shifted to 49%, and that is causing most of the insurance companies who have now established themselves for almost 7 to 8 years to make additional investments, which is likely to go into the infrastructure of India. The Reserve Bank of India has also facilitated foreign investors to invest in non-convertible debentures or non-redeemable preference shares, which are against Indian securities. And this is a significant change in that debt and debt financing at the governmental level was fairly restricted. They have now permitted domestic companies to list such debentures even if the underlying company's equity is not listed. This is a fairly large event as far as money markets are concerned and raising of finance, because this gives access to Indian opportunities in a secured manner for foreign investors. It's not just a bank which can lend, it could be any foreign investor registered with the Securities Exchange Board of India. And the instrument has to be listed, so there is always an exit. The Reserve Bank of India has provided a new framework which allows foreign portfolio investors to take parts in open offers, buyback of securities, and disinvestment of shares. Why is this an important issue? Foreign portfolio investors were only allowed to trade in the stock markets. They could not make direct investments. This really permits them to purchase, to substantially make a preferential offer and trigger an offer, buy in a public offer. So it really enables them to target Indian companies, maybe in a hostile manner if that's going to happen, or at least by a consensual method, where listed companies would see far more foreign investment. And the Reserve Bank Governor, as I mentioned, is looking to full capital account convertibility, which would mean that foreign investor can repatriate his money into his own local currency at will, which is currently not allowed. The foreign investment flows are expected to double in the next 2 years. We are expecting to, last year it was about 42 billion. This year the expectation is that we'll cross the 60 billion mark in FY15. Foreign investors are gaining confidence in the government's new policies as per the industry studies. We will require about $1 trillion by 2017. And the fund is required for infrastructure growth covering sectors like highways, ports, and airways or airports. This requires support in terms of foreign direct investments. We have entered into new comprehensive economic partnership agreements with China, Japan, Korea, USA, and Canada after the government came into force, and other countries are also lining up for these type of agreements. So there are very specific trade-related benefits that are linked with the cooperation, economic partnership agreements, and there are several countries which also enjoy a comprehensive economic cooperation agreement, like, for example, Singapore. The Make in India initiative is one of the largest initiatives that the government of India has taken up, and I'm going to specifically talk about that, to become one of the leading exporting countries of the world. And there are about 25 sectors, including oil and gas, which is one of those where Make in India proposals are encouraged. The key priorities of the new government are as follows. Infrastructure, infrastructure, and infrastructure. That's the basic theme. So it's $1 trillion economic opportunity, and for that purpose, an investor-friendly regime is being set up. We're expediting all the stalled infrastructure projects, including the freight and industrial corridors. The iron ore, which had run into a scandal, on environment has been now put back on rails, because for almost 1 year we had literally stopped production of iron ore because of the legal challenges. Coal mining had also been stuck up, but with the new government they issued an ordinance which has now been made a law, and the principles of now allocation of coal is on an auction basis, open auction basis, where there are types of auctions which are conducted, one which are connected to generating electricity, some which are really for end use like steel or alumina, and it's a very different regime which has been put into place. There's a very ambitious program for India's energy sector, for energy security and self-sufficiency. So most of the public sector undertakings in the space of oil and gas are actually making their investments abroad to ensure that India's energy security is in place. The Diamond Quadrilateral, as it's known, is the road system which links the northern part of India with the southern part in a very high-speed corridor. So these are some of the big projects, and I'll explain those a little later in the slides, which are central to how the Indian economy will change, because these have the effect of doubling, trebling or quadrupling the activity around these corridors. The paralysis which had taken place in the old government has effectively gone down, and legislative reforms are on the anvil. Significant amount of legislative reform has already happened. Clearances are also happening much quicker. They used to get stuck in the environmental ministry. The government of India is in the process of drafting a completely new environment law, which will replace the entire old act. And we have been the law firm which is commissioned to write that environmental law piece, along with FLI. So this is something which we know is on the anvil. Tax reforms are also happening in a big way. So there is clearly a move to cause tax to become predictable and certain, and to reduce delays. The key priorities of this government, because it was one of the platforms on which they got elected, was to investigate black money or the unauthorized economy of India. And a new law has been brought into place, which has been passed by both houses of parliament, putting very severe penalties on persons who do not declare their global assets, global money or global assets which they have hidden away in international locations. It could be a term of jail for almost 7 years. And along with this, therefore, they have also presented an amnesty scheme whereby people can voluntarily bring their monies into India. This is a fairly large, because it is expected that the parallel economy is as big as the Indian economy. And therefore, it's a huge amount of money that we're talking about. Regulatory scrutiny is much higher, because there are many more agreements between India and other countries now for collecting data which is based on fraud. The foreign policy, as I mentioned, with the new government has also significantly become robust and active. And a lot of the movement that we are seeing, whether it's China and Japan, whether we are seeing it as USA, whether it's, I mean, he's been moving almost to 2 or 3 foreign countries every month. And that is causing a lot of buzz in the space of trade, as also in terms of relationships. The policy for micro, small and medium enterprises, which is a very important policy, because that's the backbone of how poor people will move to an industry rather than to the agrarian space or services. So there is a large mission which is looking at how they can facilitate micro, small and medium enterprises. And the embassies have also been asked under the Invest India program to actually facilitate similar kind of enterprises in different countries to collaborate, because what you've currently seen is very large joint ventures but not enough collaboration between the MSME segment. The inflation cycle, as I mentioned, which is very important in a democracy, has been tamed. It is less than 6%, hovering at about 4%, which is quite unique in the Indian context. We used to always have a double-digit inflation. That's a fairly significant achievement. So the hot sectors for India are infrastructure, railways, ports and airports, defense, energy, manufacturing, telecom, insurance, pension. So pension along with insurance has opened up, and you're now allowed to have 49% even in the pension space. Real estate, which would include township development, and single brand retail. I should add e-commerce to this space also. So much change in a one-year period also has major challenges. It's not just a bed of roses, and there are issues in the Indian economy. I think the largest one is high expectations of this government. The promise that everything will open overnight. Obviously that cannot happen in a large democracy like India. They have control over the lower house but do not have control over the upper house, where both houses, the legislation has to go through both the houses. And therefore what is expected is that within a year's time, the election process for the upper house, which is based upon already elected members of legislations or legislatures, will change the democratic process, will change the composition of the upper house, and they will then have a majority both of the upper house and the lower house. Manufacturing is still lackluster, it could do much more. It has changed almost 2% higher than what it was in the previous regime, but it is still not enough. There is a significant debate going on in relation to land acquisition issues, and this is currently the big issue under consideration. The law has been referred to the Standing Committee of Parliament, and after that, so there will be a delay of about 3 to 6 months. And we do have a large current account deficit, which, when I show you the figures, has gone down. There is a change in the law which is expected in this space, so that the responsibility for foreign exchange management, there is an act in relation to that, is likely to change and be formulated in a different way. The Indian economy, as you will see from this slide, has moved from 4.9% to 5.5%. The index of industrial production has moved from 0.01% to 2.2%. The fiscal deficit has effectively gone up by about 6%, but this will be tamed in the coming years. The current account deficit, however, has come down from 3.1% to 1.9%. The trade deficit is also about 110 billion. Exports have moved up marginally. The direct tax collections have gone up significantly, and the indirect taxes are almost stagnant. The foreign development investment, of course, has gone up, and it is at 42, now up to April, 42 billion. And the FII flow, the monies coming in from foreign portfolio investors, has been very high, and their participation in the debt market is quite significant. What are the key initiatives that the government? This is what makes India attractive. What is the change? Why should India be looked at by foreign investors? I think these are the issues that the government of India has addressed. The first initiative of doing business or ease of doing business is because of the criticism that was levied against India, that there are too many bureaucratic processes and too many applications and rules to be followed. So the initiative that has been taken is to reduce the levels of rules, reduce the levels of applications that are needed to be filed, and make business simpler and easier. So for that purpose, some of the best practices have been put into play for clearances and ensuring compliances. The process of applying for industrial licenses or an industrial entrepreneur's memorandum has been made available on a 24/7 basis at the e-business site of the government. The defense sector has seen a huge change in that we had a limitation that if there was a dual purpose manufactured item and it could be used for manufacture of defense and non-defense, you would have to have a government approval. Now, unless it is specifically classified as a defense item, you do not require approvals. You can straight away start manufacture if it is for civilian purposes, not classified for defense. The validity of a license, which was limited to 2 years, has now been extended to 3 years. A big change in the classification codes of products, because we were out of sync with the global NIC codes, and we have replaced the NIC 2008 from, I've changed the NIC 1987, which enables us much faster and quicker export clearances. The timelines for processing applications for foreign investment have also been significantly reduced from 12 weeks to 6 weeks. And that's a big change. The online single window model for providing clearances and filing compliances are also being implemented. Government, just 3 days before we came to UK, has announced an online visa process, which is quite a change from India, in that you could apply online and in 4 days you would get your visa to India on an online process. No need to visit embassies, no need to line up. So this is the kind of change which India has shown. There is a very significant change in the incorporation of companies. It used to take us 2 months to incorporate a company. Now the process is such that it is down to 1 week or 10 days. So these are the kind of initiatives that the government has taken, and this does have an impact in which business can happen. The e-business project is also a significant project. It is one as it's put into mission mode structure. So essentially, it's like a lunar mission. How would you plan with precision in terms of how the module will go up to the moon and come back? It is as precise as those kind of missions. The individual projects with the NEGP, which is a part of the government, focuses on electronic governance such as banking, land records. So they're converting the entire land record to electronic form. And commercial taxes. We're going to have a GST system introduced in India, and just the mere introduction of the GST system will add 2% GDP to India. One single legislative change, which has now been approved by the houses, will impact the growth and the gross domestic product by 2%. That is the kind of leakage and wastage in the tax collection systems. The e-business platform has been launched right from 20th of January, and therefore all these kind of facilities, whether it's a permanent account number, the trading numbers, the director's identification numbers, receipts of incorporation certificates, all these are now online. The most important piece, as I see, for India is the whole Made in India. Made in India. So this is the symbol of this campaign. And let me add one more thing which is happening. The tiger has always been the national emblem of India. If you see our currency, the currency has a tiger printed on it. We are changing that, and our national emblem is now going to be the lion. And I think it is also partly to do with the Prime Minister's own state. He comes from the state of Gujarat, which is famous for its Gir lions, which is a special breed of lions in India. So this is one of the, again, it's just a position that we are going to be like the kings of the jungle, in a sense. That's the kind of messaging that he's sending out. 25th September 2014, 25 thrust areas have been identified, and a dedicated portal with back-end support throughout the life cycle of the industry has been prepared both at the central level and at the state level. It has been launched in every capital of India, every state capital, and in the Indian embassies and high commissions across the globe. So there is a continuous, we just now recent, when the Hanover Fair had been taken place, the Prime Minister had visited the Department of Industries and Promotion, was also present there. They promoted it for 42 days, meeting with people from Germany. So it's a national new program, and this actually makes India the destination which should be a preferred destination. What are the 25 sectors where this policy would be applicable? Automobiles, automobile components, aviation, biotechnology, chemicals, construction, defense manufacturing, electrical machinery, electronic systems, food processing, IT and business process, leather, media and entertainment, mining, oil and gas, pharmaceuticals, ports, railways, renewable energy, roads and highways, textile and garments, thermal power, tourism and hospitality, and wellness. This is a fairly large list, and you're already seeing a lot of movement in diverse activities. For example, one couldn't imagine that the larger studios using the media and entertainment are going to set up shop and manufacture films in India. That's the kind of change that is taking place. So the initiative is based on 4 pillars: new processes, new infrastructure, where the government is committed to make available, identification of 25 sectors and opening up of defense, construction and railway infrastructure, which is the backbone for growth. The intention is to change the industry's perception as a regulator rather than as a regulator to be a facilitator for the purposes of causing investment. The big project, which is again a game changer, is the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor. This is a corridor traversing 6 states of India across the north and the west coast, which is about 1,483 kilometers, and which is comprised of 3 lanes: high-speed trains, the truck lanes, and high-speed motorways. Simultaneous 3 modes of travel with a multimodal arrangement for excise issues. And along this corridor, 24 new smart cities as manufacturing cities are to be made, and bids have already been received for these 24 new cities. This will contribute, this corridor alone can cause a contribution of almost 43% to the country's gross domestic product, and more than half of industrial production and exports, and account for over 40% of workers and numbers of factory workers. So this is a very, very significant project. The last point is very important. The project will double employment, triple industrial output, and quadruple exports from the region in the next 7 to 9 years. That is the single most significant process, therefore, for India. The Smart Cities project, this is where there's a lot of interest. 100 new smart cities as a part of new urban points, because if you're expecting doubling of urbanization in India, the places where people could stay has also got to change. So for the renewal mission for recalibrating the older cities and making them up to date, as also brand new cities, is one of the thrusts, and almost ₹1 trillion is available every year to make this possible. And what is unique is that these will be special purpose vehicles. They will not be the city corps as such. They will be private special purpose vehicles which will be given and armed with the power of exacting levies, fines and taxes, which is pretty unique in the Indian context. So these are some of the corridors. These are the places where the new cities are coming up. Future projects have been identified. There are 4 other corridors which are going on and which will have a similar effect like the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor. Cisco and IBM have already submitted bids for building greenfield digital cities. How do you digitize a city? This is something which has already happened. So there is clearly foreign interest in seeing that this will happen. Special economic zones. The export promotion zones is one of the techniques by which exports will really be fueled, and India has prepared almost 62 special economic zones with special purposes, whether they are manufacturing for refineries, whether it's for export of iron ore and similar stuff. This is again a major project which is related to maritime areas, where you will connect the east coast with the west coast with several ports, and again connect through corridors for creating maritime economic regions. This is the waterway projects, cleaning up the waterway projects, creating new canals. This is again a transformational project for India. So you're seeing that the initiatives are currently focused on how the infrastructure of India can be significantly improved. And there is a new National Insurance and Investment Fund, which is funded annually to the extent of 20 billion rupees. Corporatization of ports, the whole private-public partnership, and 5 new ultra-mega power projects which have been proposed. The regulatory reforms are also significant. All the obsolete laws are being repealed because they have unintended consequences on the way business is done. And one of the most major amendments has been the introduction of the Companies Act, which is which is the new law for setting up, establishing, running, governance, management of companies. And it has many new features of how boards should be constituted. A woman director is mandatory upon public companies and similar stuff. Related party transactions are looked at. Recently, on May 1st, 2015, rules have again been changed to make the way companies can be run much simpler. Labor laws have been enhanced. There are some states which have actually changed the whole method of hire and fire. Rajasthan is one of such states, and that is likely to catch traction in other states also. And the position of women at the workplace and how they are protected is one of the major attention spaces for legislation in India. Tax, which is one of the big issues after the Vodafone case, is also receiving major attention. The general anti-avoidance rules, which were to be made applicable from 2015, have been deferred to 2017. Taxation of indirect taxes have been rationalized. Transfer of shares of a foreign company is only taxable in India when the underlying assets are more than 50%, and the foreign amalgamations and demergers will be kept out of review. Advanced price ruling agreements, which therefore can give you the benefit of a 4-year rollback backwards of how the law would be applied, the tax would be collected, are also put into place. Minimum alternative tax regime which was applicable is also being rolled back, because for the past there are cases which are going on, but prospectively minimum alternate tax is likely to be put in place. The government has assured the parliament that there will be no retrospective amendment of tax laws, which has been one of the biggest stumbling blocks of how Indian investment has been affected. The regime of real estate investment trusts is being put into place, which is going to unbundle all the rental properties which are significant in India, and you will therefore see the trade in REIT instruments in India. I think I will wind up here, because there's always something more. All that I wanted to summarize and put forth in this presentation is that this is a destination which has lumbered for many years, but you're seeing a sudden acceleration of space and time. This is perhaps because of the recognition that India, with its large labor force and significant amount of young people, are going to need opportunities for employment. And driven by that motive, that you need to create more and more employment, India is significantly opening up and accepting the global economy, albeit with the fear that yes, it should not upset the local Indian population, and is therefore a very calibrated manner in which it is being done. But the changes are significant. They may look imperceptible from the outside world, but people who are staying in India can see how much change has happened in the last 2 years. So this is the time where you and your clients should look at India for investing in India.